In this video, we are looking at coordinates. The first thing we're going to look at is the grid itself. Here we have a grid. It's called a Cartesian grid, and it's named after a French mathematician and philosopher called René Descartes. It has two axes. There's one axis going along the bottom, across like this, and there is another axis going vertically like this. You'll notice that both axes start at 0, and every time we go one square across on the grid, the number on the axis goes up by 1. The same is true going up on the vertical axis. Now these axes have names. We call the one that goes across the x-axis. And that's quite handy because the letter x looks like a cross and x is the one that goes across. We call the vertical axis the y-axis, and a way to remember that is that y is high. It rhymes. Just one more thing about the grid itself. We often call the point where the axes meet, over here in the corner, the origin. Now let's think about how you would describe a position on this grid. Let's take a look at this point here, B. How could you describe where that is on the grid? Well, one way of doing it would be to tell someone we have travelled from the origin 2 squares across and then 10 squares up to get there. Another way of describing it would be to say we've travelled 10 squares up and 2 squares across. There are other ways of describing it as well, but they would be more complicated. For example, we could say we're going to travel 1 square to the right, 8 squares up, 1 more square to the right, and 2 squares up. But that's needlessly complicated. So to keep life simple, what mathematicians have done is come up with a convention. To describe where a point is on the grid, what we always do is first describe how far across it is from the origin, and then how high up it is. You might have heard a teacher saying we go along the corridor and up the stairs, for example. Another way of helping you remember is that we deal with the axes in alphabetical order. First, we talk about the x distance travelled, and remember x is across. So for B, we would have travelled 2 across, and then we describe how high we've travelled, and remember y is high. Finally, before we get started on the questions, we don't want to write more than we need to. So we don't need to describe the point B in a whole sentence saying, starting from the origin, we have travelled 2 squares across and 10 squares up. We take a shortcut. We use something called coordinates, and we simply write the two numbers like this. So we've got the two numbers in brackets separated by a comma. The first number is your x coordinate, and that tells you how far across the point is. The second number is your y coordinate, and it tells you how high up it is. And that's all there is to it. We've already written down the coordinates of the point marked B, so I'm going to complete A, and then you can pause the video and have a go at C, D and E. Point A is 0 steps across. Starting from the origin, we don't need to go across anywhere to get up to A. So the x coordinate, the first number, is going to be a 0. Once we've gone 0 across, we then have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 squares up. So the y coordinate is 4. And the answer then is 0, 4. That's how we would say it out loud. Now pause the video and write down the coordinates for C, D and E. Here are the answers. Next, we need to plot and label some more points on the grid. F is at 3, 0. 3 is the x coordinate, and that tells us how far across we've gone, and 0 is the y coordinate. It tells us how high up we've gone. So 3, 0 is here. Starting from the origin, we go 3 across and 0 up. So we need to mark this point with the letter F. pause the video and have a go at plotting G and H on a grid. Here are those answers. G is at 0, 7. That means we are travelling 0 squares across and 7 squares up. H is at 9, 1, which is over here. That is from the origin 9 squares across and 1 square up.